Hi, it's Vicky from the Listen In. Thank you for joining me for a story today. This film has been specially made for Hertfordshire Year of Culture, but it's a story for children and families everywhere. So wherever you are, welcome along and come on in. I can't wait to show you where I am. Today, I'm at a very special place, Mill Green Mill in my home county of Hertfordshire, in about the middle of the county, and it's a working mill and it's very, very old. Parts of it have been here for about 300 years, but there's been milling happening here for about 1,000 years. I have one of my favourite ever stories to tell you, but before I do, I wanted to remind myself of what happens at a mill. And it's something to do with making food. Now, here I have some wheat, and it grows in fields. And when it's ready, it gets cut down and it gets brought to a mill like this one, where parts of the wheat get ground down by huge stones to make flour, like this. And that flour gets put in bags and sold, and it gets used to make all sorts of things to eat, like bread and biscuits, and my favourite, cake. If you ask the grown-ups in your family, they might well have some flour in their kitchen cupboard that they can show you, and maybe you could do some baking together next time you have some spare time. I actually made this loaf of bread at home in my bread maker using some flour from Mill Green Mill. So it's really nice to be back here to do some storytelling. Now this is actually a water mill. So does that mean it uses water? I think I can hear some water. I wondered how the water makes it work, and I wasn't sure. So I asked Alex, the miller, to tell me more about that. And this is what he said.
So yeah, this is a water mill, and it uses water to give it its power. So the way that works is we need a river, a flowing river, and I'm standing over the top of one right now, and when that river is flowing, the water wheel you can see right behind me will start turning. Because that water is quite heavy, all that weight of water starts landing on these big wide wooden paddles you see behind me, and everything starts moving. And then once this is turning, all of our millstones inside the mill start turning and grinding up our wheat to make our flour.
So now we know a lot more about this special place and how it works and what happens here. But I bet you're thinking, why has Vicky come to a mill to tell a story? And that would be a very good question. Well, this is no ordinary mill, my friends. Oh no. It was visited by someone very special from the olden days. Someone who wrote lots of stories and drew beautiful pictures to go with them. And her name was Beatrix Potter. Beatrix Potter was alive about 100 years ago, and she lived in another part of England, but her grandparents lived very near here in Hertfordshire, and she used to come and stay in the summer times, and she visited this mill. Beatrix Potter loved animals and nature, and I'm going to tell you one of her stories right now, and it's about an animal, but I'm not going to tell you which one. Your job by the end of this story is to see if you can work out which animal it's about. So listen out for the clues. I'm going to dedicate this storytelling to my lovely sister Lucy, and it's called The Tale of Mrs Tiggy-Winkle. Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Lucy who lived at a farm called Littletown. She was a good little girl, only she was always losing her pocket handkerchiefs. Oh. One day, little Lucy came into the farmyard crying. Oh, she did cry so. I've lost my pocket handkin. 3 handkins and a penny. Have you seen them, Tabby kitten? The kitten went on washing her white paws. So Lucy asked a speckled hen, "Sally Hennypenny, have you found 3 pocket handkins?" But the speckled hen ran into a barn clucking, "I go barefoot, barefoot, barefoot." Then Lucy asked Cock Robin, sitting on a twig. Cock Robin looked sideways at Lucy with his bright black eye, and he flew over a stile and away. Lucy climbed upon the stile and looked up at the hill behind Littletown, a hill that goes up, up, through the clouds as though it had no top. And a great way up the hillside she thought she saw some white things spread upon the grass. Lucy scrambled up the hill as fast as her short legs would carry her. She ran along a steep pathway, up and up, until Littletown was right away down below. She could have dropped a pebble down the chimney. Presently she came to a spring bubbling out of the hillside. Someone had stood a tin can upon a stone to catch the water, but the water was already running over, for the can was no bigger than an egg cup. And where the sand along the path was wet, there were footmarks of a very small person. Lucy ran on and on. The path ended under a big rock. The grass was short and green, and there were clothes props cut from bracken stems with lines of plaited rushes, and a heap of tiny clothespins, but no pocket handkerchiefs. But there was something else. A door straight into the hillside, and from inside it someone was singing, "Lily white and clean, oh, with little frills between, oh, smooth and hot, red rusty spot, never here be seen, oh." Lucy knocked once, twice, and interrupted the song. "Lily white and clean, oh, with little frills between, oh." And a little frightened voice called out, "Who's there?" Lucy opened the door, and what do you think there was inside the hill? A nice clean kitchen with a flagged floor and wooden beams, just like any other farm kitchen, only the ceiling was so low Lucy's head nearly touched it, and the pots and pans were small, and so is everything there. There was a nice, hot, singy smell, and at the table, with an iron in her hand, stood a very stout, short person, staring anxiously at Lucy. Her print gown was tucked up, and she was wearing a large apron over her striped petticoat. Her little black nose went sniffle, sniffle, snuffle, and her eyes went twinkle, twinkle, and underneath her cap, where Lucy had yellow curls, that little person had prickles. "Who are you?" said Lucy. "Have you seen my pocket handkin?" The little person made a bob curtsy. "Oh, yes, if you please 'em. My name is Mrs Tiggy-Winkle. Oh, yes, if you please 'em. I'm an excellent clear starcher." And she got something out of the clothes basket and laid it on the ironing blanket. "What's that thing?" said Lucy. "That's not my pocket handkin." "Oh, no, if you please 'em. That's a little scarlet waistcoat belonging to Cock Robin." And she ironed it and folded it and put it on one side. Then she took something else off a clothes horse. "That isn't my pinny," said Lucy. "Oh, no, if you please 'em. That's a damask tablecloth belonging to Jenny Wren. Oh, look how it's stained with currant wine. Oh, it's very bad to wash," said Mrs Tiggy-Winkle. Mrs Tiggy-Winkle's nose went sniffle, sniffle, snuffle, and her eyes went twinkle, twinkle, and she fetched another hot iron from the fire.
There's one of my pocket handkins, cried Lucy, and there's my pinny. Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle ironed it and goffered it and shook out the frills. Oh, that is lovely, said Lucy. And what are those long yellow things with fingers like gloves? Oh, that's a pair of stockings belonging to Sally Hennypenny. Look how she's worn the heels out with scratching in the yard. She'll very soon go barefoot, said Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. Why, there's another hankersniff, said Lucy, but it isn't mine. It's red. Oh, no, if you please, that one belongs to old Mrs. Rabbit, but it did so smell of onions. Oh, I've had to wash it separately. I can't get out that smell. There's another one of mine, said Lucy. And what are those funny little white things? Oh, that's a pair of mittens belonging to Tabby Kitten. I only have to iron them. She washes them herself. There's my last pocket handkin, said Lucy. And what are you dipping into the basin of starch? Oh, they're little dicky shirt fronts belonging to Tom Titmouse. Most terrible particular, said Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. And now I've finished my ironing, I'm going to air some clothes. Oh, what are these? Dear soft fluffy things, said Lucy. Oh, they're little woolly coats belonging to the little lambs at Skelgill. Will their jackets take off? Said Lucy. Oh, yes, if you please, just look at the sheep mark on the shoulder. There's one marked for Gatesgarth, and there's 3 come from Littletown. They're always marked at washing, said Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. And she hung up all sorts and sizes of clothes. Small brown coats of mice, and one velvety black moleskin waistcoat, and one red tailcoat with no tail belonging to Squirrel Nutkin, and a very much shrunk blue jacket belonging to Peter Rabbit, and a petticoat, not marked, that had gone lost in the washing. And at last the basket was empty. And then Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle made tea. A cup for herself and a cup for Lucy. They sat before the fire on a bench and looked sideways at one another. Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle's hand holding the teacup was very, very brown and very, very wrinkly with the soap suds, and all through her gown and her cap there were hairpins sticking wrong end out, ouch, so that Lucy didn't like to sit too near her. When they had finished tea, they tied up the clothes in bundles, and Lucy's pocket handkerchiefs were folded inside her clean pinny and fastened with a silver safety pin. Then they made up the fire with turf, and they came out and they locked the door and they hid the key under the doorsill. And then away down the hill trotted Lucy and Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle with the bundles of clothes. And all the way down the path, little animals came out of the fern to meet them. The very first that they met were Peter Rabbit and Benjamin Bunny. She gave them their nice clean clothes, and all the animals and birds were so very much obliged to dear Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. So that at the bottom of the hill, when they got to the stile, there was nothing left to carry except Lucy's one little bundle. Lucy scrambled up the stile with the bundle in her hand, and she turned to say good night and to thank the washerwoman, but, oh, what a very odd thing. Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle had not waited either for thanks or the washing bill. She was running, running, running up the hill, but where was her white frilled cap, and her shawl, and her gown, and her petticoat? And how very small she had grown, and how very brown and covered with prickles. Why, Mrs Tiggy-Winkle was nothing but a hedgehog.
So Mrs Tiggy-Winkle was a hedgehog. Did you guess that? I'm sure you did. Of course, hedgehogs are real animals, but they're very, very difficult to spot. I think I've only seen a real hedgehog a few times in my whole life, but I do have this little one here that I think I found on holiday, and I bought it for my children. I borrowed it back from them so that I can show you. So if you're lucky enough to see a real hedgehog sometime, you never know, it might just be Mrs Tiggy-Winkle on her way back home from doing the washing. There are lots of other characters in Beatrix Potter's books and stories as well, and some beautiful illustrations. There are characters like Jemima Puddle Duck and Jeremy Fisher and Flopsy Bunnies and Peter Rabbit, of course, and all sorts of other characters as well. And I bet you can think of your own story about an animal, maybe like Mrs Tiggy-Winkle, who's very busy doing a job. Well, everyone here at Mill Green Mill is very busy doing a job as well, so I think I better leave them to it. But you can visit this special place if you want to. They're open to the public, and lots of people come here, adults and children and families and school groups, and I'm sure they would love to welcome you along as well. But of course, if you live too far away, there's bound to be lots of other places you can visit that will be just as fun. Oh, and don't forget to do some baking. But if you make a cake, will you save some for me? Well, I'll say goodbye now, but thank you so very much to everybody here at Mill Green Mill for giving me some of their time, in particular Linda and Alex, and thank you too for listening in. Come and join me for a story again really soon. Bye for now.